Want to welcome you to another episode of Mindset Growth Podcast. I'm Gary Bontrager, your host, and I have a special co-host with me today, Ray Gage.
Special.
You're not here all the time, Ray, so it's special to have you here.
Most people think I'm not here all the time either, but we'll see where that goes.
You have interesting perspectives that challenge the way people think a lot, and that's why often it's a bit of a mind twister. So today we're going to do something a little different. Often when we do podcasts and we have guests, we tend to do an interview about the things they overcame and maybe the hardship and the lessons they've learned in life and try to share those stories. Today, we're not going to do that. I'm pulling out a topic and we're going to discuss that and I hopefully challenge some people differently on their thinking process. And it's going to be based off of a clip that I heard from the show Yellowstone. One of the favorite cowboys on that show, Lloyd, making a comment about Tate, the young grandson. He said, either you're born a willow or you're born an oak. That's where toughness comes from. You're either born with toughness or you're not. I know you like to challenge things. When I hear that, there's that mental piece that, yes, certain people probably have certain foundational just makeup that maybe causes them to be more aggressive, like when we study personalities and things. But I would challenge the fact that toughness comes from tough experiences. Hard times create hard people. Soft times create soft people. I'd like to know what some of your take is on that. I know you're sitting there spewing, in your head's just turning and you're about to spew something.
No, it's so what I like to think about that is and I understand that there was context probably when he said that, right? So there's context, as I watched the show too, and I don't remember exactly when that was said.
The context I could set is they were, as the cowboys did, took the cattle up into the mountains in the summer and they were needing to come down. And Lloyd was telling his mother, because Tate wanted to stay up in the mountains. And it takes a certain type of person to want to rough it living in a tent up in the mountains.
Right. So then I start to think about, okay, so what do we know about willows and what do we know about oaks? So it's like you can bend a willow a lot more than you can bend an oak before it'll break.
You can.
But it's also harder to break the oak because of how strong it is.
Right. And the
so
longevity is a whole nother aspect of it too.
Then you have longevity. So, a willow, I think a willow tree's normal lifespan is 30 years.
Right.
So an oak could be hundreds of years if it has the right growing conditions, right? So you have that, right? So where does an oak grow and where does a willow grow? Well, a willow has to have a source of water.
Right.
I mean, and sometimes a willow will mess things up, right? Because it's looking for water, and if the only water that it knows is there is going through a pipe in your backyard, it's going to figure out how to get into that pipe, right? And then, I mean, I've actually had I had a neighbor one time that actually had that happen, where his water backed up in his basement, and what they ended up finding out is the willow tree in the backyard had grown into the pipe because it was it was a constant water source. Because it was the drain for his sump. So, I mean, you start to think about, okay, the willow can be a little bit of a nuisance too sometimes. Right. So what do we know about willows? What do you know about oaks? And then how does that apply contextually? So there's people that would probably rather be willows than oaks. Right. So that's
but I
one
think
aspect
what I was looking at when I look at that, and I seen that statement or heard that statement, and I'm watching that unfold. We live in a society, though, where we try to make things as easy as possible, which is human nature. But it often then creates this dependency. And yet, I think when you look at, we're in America, and America is really been created off of a capitalist society and there's different views, and we're not trying to get political by any of this, but that's what built America was, capitalism. And you often see the people that are strong and aggressive be most successful in business or development of, whether it was all the way back to when they developed the West, to today, maybe developing housing, subdivisions, and you name it. But you're going to see people that are really strong and can take tremendous amounts of pressure and things that a lot of people just don't want to take. So I guess that's where I go with when I see that. But usually when you trace that back, something has happened in that person's life to cause them to be a stronger person.
Right. So you're basically then what you're doing is you're describing different people, different personality types.
Right.
And how those personalities are formed. So
the willow will bend and flex, but it also is going to go with the flow of what the environment is, a lot more so. Mm-hmm. An oak is just going to stand there and be steady.
Right.
And take a test of time, but they've weathered the same storms. They're just not as movable. And so there's a lot of analogies drawn from that. But what I would go back to as another example, a friend of mine who has a large sales organization says the people that are most successful are not the people that are the most charismatic. It's the people who are put in a position to have responsibility. He said, if you can find a young man that's 20, 21 years old and his girlfriend got pregnant and he gets married and has one or two more kids, the responsibility shift that happened for that individual is so big that usually that's the one that's going to be successful. He's got a buddy over here that's maybe more charismatic, but didn't get anybody pregnant, didn't get married, doesn't have the responsibility. So there's not that motivation. So I think and I'm using that example because, again, one young man got put into a tough situation and he had to rise to the occasion and support a family. The other one doesn't need to. And because of that, he doesn't need the resources that the one did that ended up with a family. So it's just another example of he had no choice if he was really going to support his family and be.
He did have a choice.
Well, he had a choice, but his choice
was to do that.
Right, you're right. He did have a choice, but the only good choice to be a solid human being and contribute back to society was to step up and address that responsibility and find a way to be successful and provide.
Right. Because it was also his choices that got him to the point where he had to make that choice.
Right.
So the funny thing about that story is when you tell about the successful sales organization, right? The people that are going to be most successful, the one thing I would add to that is I heard somebody say this, and is find the guy or gal that has the family and a boat.
Yes.
Because boats are money traps, right?
Right.
So that's the guy. That's the person that needs the most money. So that's the person that's going to be the most motivated. They've got a family and a boat.
And they want their hobbies, and that's going to keep them motivated.
Separately, I'm Gage.
And I'm Bontrager.
Together, we are Gage Bontrager Consulting.
We work on changing your mindset,
developing leaders,
building systems and processes,
helping you grow personally and professionally
to achieve the success that you want personally and professionally.
However you choose to define success for you.
Reach out to us and follow us on social media or look us up on the website, and that will put you on a path to achieve what is missing in your life.
Thanks for watching this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast.
Right. On this vein of family, I want to take another study. So preparing for this, one of the things that I find very fascinating is in the family now, you've got a mother who typically they're just naturally born with this mothering instinct. So they're trying to protect their son. You've got the father over here who when his son falls down, skins his knee, like, hey, suck it up, get up, brush it off yourself, let's go. The mother's going to pick him up, wash it off, put a bandage on it. And I think what I have seen out of that study, and I'm just taking this off top of my head, but we are in a place where the boys need more tough love from their dad, and they're getting protected too much from their mother. And there was a whole study about that and the effects of how that happens. And I'm given a very vague, and I'm not going to name it because I don't want to be held accountable to this, but it's interesting to me because it's such a different approach from a male to how a female will approach that. Now, not all women are that way. Some women are more aggressive, and it comes back to personalities a lot. But once again, how much we protect, and I'm just using this as a son, it can be the girls too. How much are we protecting our kids, and how much are we letting them fall down, skin their knee, and have to learn to get up and not make a big deal about it? Because we've all seen the child who ran, fell down, and everybody just kind of freezes and watches. Kid pops up, maybe cries a little, may look around, and if nobody's responding, on they go. But as quick as they see somebody jump, then the meltdown begins. And as adults, we do the same stupid stuff way too often. If we get attention, we're going to milk it. And if we can let it go, then that's a whole different response, and the result is way different.
So what was the study was done to answer a question, or?
The study was done on how kids get coddled. And basically what the study has shown is that in America, and this is really, I'm taking it somewhat out of context for this example, but in America as a whole, the men are not present enough in the kids' lives because they need that maybe a little tougher exterior from a man in their life to say, suck it up, let's move on, and show them a more aggressive approach to life. So the study really, what it really come out to be was about men are not involved in their kids' lives. And, we can go down a lot of rabbit holes on that. And I don't want to do that because of, kids growing up without fathers in their homes and things like that. And there's a lot to be said when both parents are active in a child's life. So, but my point just simply is with that, as I read that, it intrigued me, the fact that how are we coddling our kids? Because I know that we can all sit here, and I hope for you as an audience listening to this, think back in your life and think of those times, because it comes back to we always respond from our past experience. So if we've been coddled and softer in the past experience, and all of a sudden we're 35 years old and we've had something traumatic happen in our life, we can go into poor me mode, and it may take us a long time to just overcome that tough time. And I'm just here to have people be aware of, how was I raised? What are my past experiences? Did they accurately set me up for what I'm going to face, for the decisions I'm going to make? Sometimes you and I in business work with people that they get put in tough positions that they maybe didn't before. And then it makes it really difficult for them to make the decisions to fire somebody, to make the changes, because they've never been in those tough decisions.
So let me get this straight. You're saying that it's important for people to sit down and think about this stuff?
Yes.
I don't understand that. I mean, who does that, Gary? I mean, really, who does that?
This guy.
Yeah.
You do. And it comes back to a statement you make all the time, and I to challenge assumptions, because all of that's built off of our history.
Right. So many times I get frustrated. So talking to clients, especially, right? We're working with somebody, and you made a statement earlier. You said, a lot of times our responses are based off of our past experience. But,
right.
But the reality is that I would challenge that a little bit, but I would say that's a reaction. our reaction is based off of our past experience. If we want to respond instead of react, it's because we took the time to think about it and decide that if we get into a situation like this is how we're going to respond, not react. A reaction is something that happens in the spur of the moment. And the only way that reaction can happen in the spur of the moment is based off of your past experience. It's the only way it can happen.
Right.
And it happens like that because you're making assumptions that situation is the same as the one you were in before. And so that's why you react the way that you do.
100%.
And that's not effective ever. A reaction causes another reaction. There's nothing good that has ever come from a chain reaction.
How many times have you heard somebody later say, I wish I hadn't responded or reacted like that?
I wish I hadn't done that. Yep.
And I know on this podcast, I have shared stories of things I did, and people have had asked me, how could you make that decision so quickly? And I'd made that decision long before that situation arose.
Right.
I tried to build a library for those situations coming at me enough to the point that I can go, okay, it's like this and this. I can now make this decision.
Yep. So I like to ask people the question, when is the last time you stopped to think about what you were thinking about?
So what you're saying is you have to change your mindset to change your direction to get a different result.
The only way it changes. It's the only way you're going to change anything is if you change the way you think.
So one more study I'm going to bring up, and then we're going to wrap this deal up because we can go into long rabbit holes in all of this. But I want to challenge people today with this podcast to think differently how they approach things. Another study that I read is that women are more attracted to men that have the ability to figure things out and to solve problems than they are to men that are very wealthy. So when I read that, I was like, to me, it was very interesting because you kind of think of these guys and they own a yacht and they've, fly in their own private jets, but it's such a vastly different lifestyle than most people grew up in that it's hard to even comprehend that. But we as humans like to feel taken care of, nurtured, have, a good just confidence in the system that we're living in, that we're going to be protected and taken care of. And it can be men or women really in all of that. But the humans that are going to, that typically then are going to attract together are the ones that can solve problems and work through those together. So it comes back to there takes a sense of mental toughness that's usually developed out of hard experiences for people to learn to adapt. And I would go back to, if we're going to sit and cry in the sand because of what life dealt us that we cannot control, which is yet a whole nother probably episode on itself, just managing what we can control, letting the rest of it go. But I just found that one fascinating as well and felt like it tied together because it comes back to people that have strength, have mental strength, and can actually become problem solvers and be somewhat nimble. And because, to me, it was just interesting. I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
Oh, I have lots of thoughts on that. But
share a quick one.
So it some of it goes back to, the choices that you make, right? So you can choose to be a willow or an oak.
Right.
So you can choose that. One other thing is, your life comes from you, not at you. You can choose to look at something different than the other person standing next to you is looking at it, right? So
I just want to make sure people catch that. Life comes
from you, not at you. If you want to hear that, to me, is the closest thing to understanding what you would say, what's the secret of success or what's the secret of life, and I want to break this down real quick as they listen to what you're about to share.
That's the difference between reaction and being prepared.
And being prepared to respond.
Right.
Right. But just as an example I like to use is, if you see a pile of manure, right? You have two people standing looking at a pile of manure. One of them's running the other way because it stinks and they don't want to be around the manure. The other one's asking where they can get more to fertilize their garden.
Right.
So one of them is looking at it as a pile of shit, and the other one is looking at it as fertilizer.
Right.
And it's the same thing.
Right.
It's the exact same thing. It's just how one is choosing to look at it differently than the way the other is choosing to look at it. And it's a silly example, but if you think about life, I mean, people love living in the city. Other people hate living in the city. What's the difference? It's not the city. It's the person.
Right.
So when you think about it like that, think about how many things in your life are like that. And if you sit and think about it long enough, you probably realize that it's pretty much just about everything.
I would agree with that. I would, as we wrap this up, I want you, the listener, to think about your past, what's shaped you. And if there's a challenge I can give you is sit down and figure out how you can respond in place of react. Whenever we react, it's becoming off of impulses that are not, we've not predetermined. It's just a natural reaction based off of past experiences. Once you start to respond, you will totally change your life. You're going to be much more in control of how you behave and what you do and what your outcomes are. So often, even with relationships, people are looking for a life partner, somebody to spend time with, maybe their friend group, and they're wondering why they're not getting the results they want in that group of people. And a lot of times I would challenge you to go back and look at the things that you're doing, the decisions you're making to attract those people. If you want different people in your life, you need to change yourself so that you can attract something different. Thank you for watching this episode of Mindset Growth Podcast.